CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Andrew Wilson. Our top stories this hour. The worst storm to hit southern China in decades. At least one person is dead as Typhoon Saola leaves a trail of destruction and flooding across the region. China's International Trade and Services Fair opens in Beijing, with President Xi promising to open the sector up to the wider world. A final act of farewell. Petals dropped in the Pacific for victims of Hawaii's wildfires.
3, 2, 1, 0.
And the sky's the limit. India successfully launches a rocket towards the sun. Typhoon Saola has left a trail of destruction across parts of southern China, with at least one person reported dead. Blasting winds of up to 200 kilometers per hour, the super typhoon is the worst to hit the region in decades. Tens of millions of people across Hong Kong were forced to take shelter, and hundreds of flights had to be cancelled. Schools, businesses and the city's busy financial district were forced to shut. Local authorities say warnings will remain in place until Sunday due to continuing rainfall and flooding. The storm made landfall in the southern Chinese province of Guangdong on Saturday, bringing strong gusts and record storm surges. Authorities say despite weakening, Saola is still a threat, with hundreds of thousands of people evacuated from potential risk zones. Our correspondent Anne Cheng has more now from Hong Kong.
So Typhoon Saola, Hong Kong issued its first hurricane signal of level 10 since 2018. A level 10 is the highest warning signal under the city's weather system. It was issued at around 8 p.m. yesterday as Saola passed through the city, and it was closest to Hong Kong at around 11 p.m., skirting within 30 kilometers south of the city's observatory. The average wind speed was beyond 200 kilometers per hour near its eye, and the typhoon was at level 10 for about 7 hours. And as Saola moved away from the city and winds had weakened, it was downgraded to a level 8, and then it was further downgraded to a level 3 at around 4 p.m. today. The typhoon is still at a level 3 right now, and from where I am in Wan Chai district, it's still quite windy and perhaps a little bit of rain. However, seas will still be rough with swells, and squally showers are expected. Now, during this typhoon, some people told local media that they could feel their residential buildings swaying. Solar panels were reportedly blown off the rooftops of high-rise buildings, while others had shared on social media that they had broken windows or cracked glass at their homes. Meanwhile, the government reported over 1,500 fallen trees, 21 cases of flooding, and at least 2 cases of landslides, and at least 86 people were injured during this typhoon period. Compared to Typhoon Mangkhut in 2018, the effects of Typhoon Saola on Hong Kong seems less severe. Experts say that Saola's weakening on its final approach to Hong Kong might explain the smaller storm surge. Now, with the typhoon weakening, Hong Kong has started to resume normalcy. With transport, buses have gradually resumed services. So the same goes for ferries and the railway service. Meanwhile, the high-speed rail will resume service tomorrow. Flights also have gradually resumed, and with over 460 flights canceled, the airport is working to clear out its backlog to reschedule those flights. With the typhoon downgraded at around 4 p.m., that's close to the end of a business day, so I don't think that most shops will reopen today, but I believe that some restaurants probably will reopen tonight, especially since it's the weekend. And looking ahead, the showers are expected to ease off tomorrow, and there will likely be hot and sunny periods in the next couple of days. Back to you.
Taiwan is bracing for the landfall of Typhoon Haikui, which has been upgraded from a tropical storm and is expected to make landfall on Sunday. Authorities have cordoned off high-risk locations and warned people to stay away from beaches and mountain areas. Flights and ferries have also been grounded. The storm, which is weaker than Typhoon Saola, is expected to bring heavy rain into next week. The Hawaii wildfires that destroyed parts of Maui in August may now be extinguished, but rebuilding efforts have yet to begin. President Biden announced $95 million in aid for the region, but the community itself will be key to how the area recovers. CGTN's Alistair Baverstock now reports.
On the closest surfing beach to Lahaina, the charred smell of the town that was burned in the August wildfires is still perceptible in the breeze. Here, beside the Pacific Ocean, a memorial is being held for one of the victims. Carol Hartley was killed in the blaze, and on the day that would have been her 61st birthday, her friends and relatives gathered to say goodbye.
She went back in to save somebody and didn't think of herself, and that's who Carol was. So although we might be feeling all of these things, the most thing we feel is love and compassion for one another.
As Maui now looks to the future, its sense of community will be fundamental to the rebuilding process. Lahaina native Kaipo Kekona is among those leading recovery efforts.
There's an old proverb that's ikavama mua, ikavama hope, or the answers to our future lie in the past. And if we could bring those practices back in and value those and understand those needs and practices to better the impacts of climate change.
Deadliest wildfire in over a century.
The Biden administration has pledged $95 million to strengthen Lahaina's electrical grid as it rebuilds. Its ageing state blamed in part for contributing to the disaster. But with the local economy dependent on tourists who may now not come, local government leaders argue Maui needs much more help from Washington.
We can put 100% of our efforts into the recovery, or we can put 100% of our efforts into hosting tourists. But if we try to do both, I don't think we'll do a good job at either. So the tourists didn't only stay in West Maui, they went to all the areas and frequented all the businesses. And so the federal aid that needs to come is island-wide.
As the recovery process begins, the community sees opportunities to build back better.
You know, I was told a lot when growing up that Hawaii's going to change the world. Imagine if every property was built with solar power in that entire burn zone that we had. We would produce more power for our entire island just by rebuilding our town. I do say and believe that moving forward we can build this up better, you know.
As the memorial finishes, the mourners paddle out to sea to form a surf circle, a final act of farewell to one friend among many who lost their lives in the tragedy. A helicopter soars overhead and drops flower petals over the Pacific, caught by the wind and carried back towards Lahaina, flecks of hopeful colour over black ashes. Alistair Baverstock, CGTN, Lahaina, Hawaii.
Russia says it's foiled a new plot by Ukraine to blow up the Crimea bridge. Moscow says 3 unmanned Ukrainian naval boats were intercepted off the Black Sea coast late on Friday, with the first one detected just after midnight. The bridge, which spans the Kerch Strait linking Russia to the Crimean Peninsula, has been badly damaged by drone attacks twice since the conflict broke out. 2 people were killed in the last strike in July. Kiev has not commented on the claims. And Russia says its latest nuclear weapons system is now operational. The Sarmat missile complex has been put on combat duty, according to Moscow's space agency. The weapon, nicknamed Satan II, had been due to go into service at the end of last year, but has been subject to delays. In June, President Putin said the fleet of the 200-ton Sarmat missiles, which can each carry up to 15 nuclear warheads, would be deployed as soon as possible. Coup leaders in Gabon have reopened the country's borders with immediate effect. Military officers closed the frontiers after seizing power in the West African state on Wednesday. It came after incumbent President Ali Bongo had won a 3rd term in office in contested polls. While land, sea and air borders have reopened, the nightly curfew will remain in place. The African Union has warned of sanctions unless Gabon returns to constitutional rule. But coup leaders say there will be no rush to hold elections, saying it would put Gabon at risk of repeating what it's called the same mistakes of the past.
The dissolution of the institutions of the Republic is temporary. The aim is to reorganize them, to make them more democratic tools, more in line with international standards in terms of respect for human rights, fundamental freedoms, democracy and the rule of law, but also in the fight against corruption, which has become commonplace in our country, money laundering, and above all, the preservation of the environment, which is a battle dear to our country.
You're watching CGTN. Still to come, as Singapore sees its warmest decade on record, locals prepare for more extreme heat in the future.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliette Mann.
This week on Razor, saving eyesight using robots and stem cells. And an implantable fuel cell that runs on the excess glucose in your blood.
It's just using your metabolism to produce electricity, and in the not-so-distant future we can produce the energy we need to power up all medical devices, implants, pacemakers.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. The worst storm to hit southern China in decades. At least one person is dead as Typhoon Saola leaves a trail of destruction and flooding across Hong Kong. The storm is now affecting the province of Guangdong, bringing strong gusts and record storm surges. Hundreds of thousands of people have been evacuated from high-risk areas. China plans to widen market access to its service industry and promote cross-border trade. That's the message from President Xi Jinping, who addressed the opening day of the China International Fair for Trade and Services in Beijing. Dai Kaiyi has more.
Speaking via video link, President Xi said the fair aims to build consensus, strengthen confidence, and pull efforts for the development of the global service sector and trade and services. He said there are crucial factors for economic globalization and growth. This year marks 45 years of China's reform and opening up policy. President Xi vowed the country would promote a high standard of opening up and Chinese-style modernization with high-quality development. He said China would cooperate with all parties to advance inclusive development.
China will create a more open and inclusive development environment. We'll expand the global network of high-standard free trade areas, actively engage in negotiations on the negative list for trade in services and investment, and further open service areas such as telecommunications, tourism, law, and vocational examinations. In the services sector, we'll expand the opening up of comprehensive demonstration zones, as well as conditional pilot free trade zones and free trade ports, and take the lead in aligning with high-standard international economic and trade rules. We'll widen access to China's service sector, advance opening up in cross-border services trade, improve the level of standardization of services trade, and steadily expand institutional opening up.
China's president stressed the importance of synergy between different countries' development strategies and cooperation initiatives. He vowed China would promote services and digital trade with Belt and Road partner countries. Xi Jinping also highlighted the importance of innovation.
China will improve the path of innovation-driven development. We'll move faster to cultivate new drivers for the digitalization of services trade, rule out pilot reforms on basic systems for data, and promote the development of digital trade through reform and innovation. We'll establish a national voluntary greenhouse gas emission reduction trading market and support the services sector in playing a big role in green development. We'll push forward the integrated development of services trade with modern services industries, high-end manufacturing, and modern agriculture to unleash more vitality for innovation.
The president said China would share the outcomes of its modernization drive by creating market opportunities and offering more services to the world. Xi said the global economy thrives in openness and withers in seclusion. He called on the world to work together for a brighter and more prosperous future.
Opening up is a key message China sends across to attendees at the event, as the country has been playing an active role in working with other countries to strengthen trade and services on a global scale. The summit will be followed with various forums, exhibitions, and business promotion conferences over the next few days, with the fair tapping into opportunities and more international cooperation in the future. 戴凯一 CGTN 北京。
Inmates at 6 prisons in Ecuador have released 57 guards and policemen they were holding hostage. The government says the officers were seized by a drug gang in a protest at a clampdown on some of its members being held in jail. 2 car bombs also exploded near offices of the prison service in the capital, Quito. Tensions been rising as the country heads towards a second round of presidential elections. An anti-corruption candidate was assassinated in August, with others reporting death threats. A former member of Singapore's ruling party has secured a landslide victory to become the country's new president. Tharman Shanmugaratnam, a former deputy prime minister, won with more than 70% of the vote. Analysts say the win is a sign of public trust in the ruling People's Action Party, despite a series of high-profile government scandals in recent months. And staying with Singapore, and soaring temperatures there have left local residents vulnerable to the effects of heat stress. The tropical nation has just recorded its warmest decade on record, and local authorities have responded by launching guidelines to help people face future extreme weather, as CGTN's Miro Liu now reports.
In May this year, Singapore experienced its highest temperature in 4 decades. Experts are now warning that temperatures in the island nation will remain high and might even increase over the next 6 to 12 months.
It's located around the equator, so it has hot temperatures all year round. It's influenced by natural climate variability, such as El Nino, which can cause spikes in the temperatures because of the urban heat island effect, because of greenhouse gases, means that Singapore's average annual temperature is now 3 to 4 degrees C warmer than it was when the country began.
To help its residents manage their health and reduce the risk of heat-related illness, Singapore has released a national heat stress advisory. It follows 3 levels of risk: low, moderate, and high, and aims to provide simple tips to the public so that they can adapt their routines, take precautions, and dress suitably based on the weather.
I think this is step number 1 to create awareness, so that at least I know, okay, I have an elderly parent who is living alone. When the weather is hot with this advisory, I better give him or her a call to check whether he or she is doing well. I think that itself, could potentially save lives.
The advisory is based on the Wet Bulb Globe Temperature, or WBGT, an internationally recognized measure that factors in air temperature, humidity, wind speed, and solar radiation. The Meteorological Service of Singapore, however, warns that while the WBGT considers environmental factors, personal health, activity levels, and job conditions are just as crucial. They strongly urge the public to watch out for signs of heat stress, like headaches, nausea, dizziness, irritability, and confusion.
The 3 factors that determine a hot body are environment, attire, and work. Which means even when the environment is mild, for whatever reason you put on layers of clothing because of, let's say, work requirements, and for whatever reason you work exceptionally hard, you can incur heat injury.
Experts see the advisory as primarily a short-term measure. In the long run, Singapore needs to focus on nature-based remedies to cool down the concrete jungle. And the city-state can in turn serve as a living urban lab for cooling solutions across the globe. Miro Liu, CGTN, Singapore.
India has successfully launched a spacecraft to study the sun, just over a week after it landed a rover at the south pole of the moon.
3, 2, 1, 0.
The Aditya L1 rocket blasted off from the Satish Dhawan Space Center in the south of the country. Thousands gathered to watch the launch. Another 500,000 tuned in to follow it live on TV. If successful, the spacecraft will become the first mission from an Asian country to go into orbit around the sun.
The Aditya L1 spacecraft has been injected in an elliptical orbit of 235 by 19,500 kilometers, which is intended very precisely by the PSLV, very unique mission mode here, with the upper stage of the PSLV taking 2 burn sequence for injecting the primary satellite for the first time.
Leo Enright is a space commentator and broadcaster. He told me what kind of orbit the Indian spacecraft is aiming for.
The L1 position, the Lagrange point, is used by several spacefaring nations to position spacecraft so that they're above the Earth, but between the Earth and the Sun permanently, so they see the Sun all the time, but can talk to the Earth all the time as well. This is a unique position in space, very, very difficult to achieve an orbit in this position. And the fact that India are on their way, it will take them some months, but the fact that India are on their way is an extraordinary achievement by this newly asserting itself space nation.
Well, yeah, I mean, India's been busy, hasn't it? It's only 10 days since it got a rover onto near the south pole of the moon. Also, the program, I gather, is extremely economical by, say, NASA standards, so they're doing well there. Is this all about prestige or science, or both?
I think it's both, and also economic, because there is a strong pressure on countries now to understand the sun much better than we have in the past because of its influence on what we call space assets. That is, satellites in orbit around the Earth and on their way to the moon and Mars are affected constantly by the sun. The Indian space program likes to talk about the angry sun. That is the sun when it has huge explosions on its surface that send vast amounts of energy out towards the Earth. This can damage satellites, including Indian satellites, and they want that spacecraft out there to warn them about the dangers of these, what we call solar storms.
Now, the Indians have got, what, 50 satellites up there already. There are tens of thousands of international satellites, one way or the other, orbiting the Earth, all having different purposes. But this business of sending data back, I understand what you're saying about the warnings of the sun's behavior, but these satellites also send back information that's beneficial to the economy, to agriculture, to understanding the prevarications of weather on Earth as well, aren't they?
Absolutely. And in fact, the whole basis, the whole rationale for India's space program at the beginning was communications because of the vast size of the country, and weather, most importantly, because of the typhoons, particularly in the Bay of Bengal. The Indian space program has saved millions of lives over the decades since they began launching weather satellites. And as you say, also the cost. The Americans and the Europeans typically might spend up to $1.5 billion sending a spacecraft to one of these Lagrange points. India just spent $50 million.
The start of the new school year has been disrupted in parts of the US, where at least 3 school districts have been forced to temporarily close amid a resurgence of COVID-19 and other viruses. It sets the stage for another uncertain school year, as our correspondent Tony Waterman reports from Texas.
Classes in Magoffin County, Kentucky had barely settled into the rhythm of a new school year when they came to an abrupt halt. All 5 of the district's schools were shuttered for 2 days last month amid an outbreak of illness, including the stomach virus, strep throat, and COVID-19.
Usually we see a lot of illnesses when school starts back among the younger students, but this was kind of spread out all the students too. My understanding, they had some custodians, bus drivers, and also that were absent too with the COVID, which also made it difficult to run the school too.
Magoffin Public Health Director Pete Shepard says local doctors were reporting 40 new cases of COVID a day among kids. That didn't include positive at-home tests. Attendance plunged to 83%.
If the attendance gets below a certain number, then you start losing state money. So they decided to shut down and just try to nip in the bud before it got started full-fledged.
Schools in other parts of Kentucky and South Texas were also forced to temporarily suspend classes as a late summer surge in COVID-19 sweeps across the country. While case numbers still remain well below the height of the pandemic, the latest data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention show an increasing number of tests are coming back positive, while hospitalizations nationwide have risen for 6 consecutive weeks. Experts say a relaxation of COVID precautions like masking and distancing is largely to blame.
I think it's also compounded a little bit by the heat waves that we've had that have brought many more people indoors to really protect themselves from the extreme weather, extreme heat that we've had. And that has, I think, also facilitated some transmission of COVID over the summer months.
According to the CDC, 96% of Americans over 16 years old now have some level of immunity to COVID, from vaccination, infection, or both, which could help limit the number of severe cases. In Magoffin County, Pete Shepard says symptoms among students have been mild, and for now, there's no talk of reimposing COVID safety measures.
COVID's not going away. It's here. It's going to come as each one of these things mutate. It's going to keep, we're going to have another one and another one and another one.
Which means another unpredictable school year. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Austin, Texas.
Quick look at our top stories again. The worst storm to hit southern China in decades. At least one person is dead as Typhoon Solar leaves a trail of destruction and flooding across the region. Taiwan is bracing for the landfall of Typhoon Haikui, which has been upgraded from a tropical storm and is expected to make landfall on Sunday. China's International Trade and Services Fair opens in Beijing, with President Xi promising to open the sector up to the wider world. And that is the world today. Thanks for watching. There's more news on CGTN, Europe's channel, on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. More news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's The Agenda with Juliet Mann. For now, from all of us here in London, goodbye.